Let's talk a little today about playing it safe. I think I've mentioned before that there are a few things I like to collect. Playing cards, for example, and books by Stephen King and other favorite authors. Like many people, I like to collect pictures of presidents, especially ones with a greenish tint to them. I also collect aphorisms, proverbs, epigraphs, wise sayings. One of my favorites is "Leap and the net will appear." The first time I came across that phrase was in the book The Artist's Way by Julia Cameron, which I've talked about in another video. The quote itself is attributed to American naturalist John Burroughs, although some folks on the internet also attribute it to a Zen saying. Regardless, the idea is straightforward enough. There are times when your fear of failure, specifically your fear of the consequences of failure, hold you back from taking a chance on something that could be great. Sometimes you're better off to go ahead and take that chance. Trust that if the risk does not go the way you want, you'll nonetheless come away okay. It's a secular way of saying, have faith that things will work out. It's a powerful sentiment. The fact is, nobody ever achieved anything worth noting without taking a chance. When you're weighing the pros and cons of making a certain choice, you're more likely to move forward if you maybe don't put your thumb on the cons side of the scale. Now, I was in my 20s and kind of adrift in life when I started working on The Artist's Way, and this idea of taking the proverbial leap and trusting that I wouldn't end up in a free fall of doom was both exciting and a little frightening. Frightening because what if the net doesn't appear after all? Nonetheless, I was moving nowhere fast in my life at the time, so I started taking those leaps. I wasn't reckless about it, but still. I'll give you an example. I was burned out in my high-tech career, so I decided to take time off and do something that I thought mattered a little more than what I'd been doing. I decided to go into teaching. I did the work to get a provisional teaching certificate, and soon found a job as a permanent substitute math teacher at a local middle school where their 8th grade class had already gone through 2 math teachers so far that year. The job was challenging, but it was exactly what I had hoped for. I was doing good work where my efforts were helping to make the world a better place. You may not think so, but the world is better off when people can understand basic algebra, and these kids had had it pretty rough up till that point. I stayed through to the end of the school year, brought stability to a chaotic situation, and got the kids caught up to where they should have been with regard to their math skills. At the end of the school year, the head of the math department offered me a permanent position. When she told me how much it would pay, my heart sank. You see, I did the math. I couldn't afford to live in my Boston area apartment and continue making my modest car payments on the salary they were offering, let alone buy food or clothes or occasionally take my girlfriend out on a date. I wanted to say yes to the job, but if I said yes, I'd still have to find another way to make enough to pay the bills. And if I said yes as a placeholder until I found a better paying job, I'd be depriving the school district the time they needed to look for and find another teacher for that position. But what if I said no and I couldn't find another job? In retrospect, I guess either decision would have involved a certain amount of leaping and hoping the net would appear. Anyway, I made the tough decision to pass on their offer, even though I didn't have anything else to fall back on. That was a rough conversation. And 2 days later, and I mean literally 2 days later, I got a call from a company I had previously worked for asking if I was available for a higher level position than I was in previously, and that paid over twice what the teaching position paid. And that job very quickly led to another job, which moved me from Boston to Seattle, taking my girlfriend with me, and soon afterwards she and I bought a house, got married, and I became a believer in leap and the net will appear. Here's the thing about playing it safe. We are told by so many people with the best of intentions to follow the traditional path. Go to school, go to college, get a job, get married, have kids, get a mortgage, and on and on. I think a lot of people who advise us to play it safe do so because they have made the same decisions. And yet, we all know that playing it safe is not safe. Conformity is not the same as security. We know that going to college can lead to lots of debt and still doesn't guarantee a well-paying job to handle those loans. We know that employed people lose their jobs all the time. Married people get divorced all the time. Having kids sometimes leads to heartbreak, and that economic downturns can blow up the mortgage and take the house with it. Actor and comedian Jim Carrey gives a great graduation speech about how his father was a very talented man who chose not to follow his dreams and instead took a conventional job in order to provide for his family. And yet, the illusion of job security was shattered. His father lost his job and was unable to provide for his family, and it was all for naught. He gave up on his talent and his dreams for nothing. To paraphrase Mr. Carey, since conforming to the play it safe path could just as easily end in defeat, why not take the risk instead and pursue your dreams? Now, time for a reality check. I'm a math guy. I understand how probability works. I know the odds of a steady paycheck are higher with a traditional job at an established company as opposed to a non-traditional job or working at a startup. And the odds of finding success in your chosen career, traditional or non-traditional, are vastly improved if you have a solid education, and that often means a college degree. I know that there are a great many advantages to having the stability that a marriage provides, and the odds of staying together and enjoying the benefits of a strong, enduring relationship are far higher within a marriage than without one. The odds are better that you'll have a safety net to help catch you in your old age if you have children, rather than if you don't. In all of these cases, the odds tend to make it more likely you'll be mostly okay if you follow the more traditional path. However, the odds also all but guarantee that you will not become rich working on the clock for somebody else, that you'll not likely make as much of a difference to your family, your community, or the world as you could if you occasionally made bolder moves. And it's okay. It is okay. It's okay to follow the traditional path. It's okay to follow a non-traditional path, too. One road is probably easier than the other, but the riskier road is probably going to be a little more interesting. And by interesting, I mean you might end up owning several yachts, or you might end up being chased by a bear. I've got lots more stories to tell about leaping and the net appearing. Sometimes leaping allowed me to rise up to amazing heights, and I didn't need a net at all. Sometimes leaping meant I was caught by a net that was a bit further down than I would have liked. But I'll also note that the net has always appeared. And I'll further note that when I tried to play it safe, I sometimes went into free fall anyway. Since I'm a math guy who loves probability, though, let me leave you with this analogy. Life is like a no-limit game of poker. If you're leaping all the time, or if you take risks where the potential payoff is absolutely not worth the probable cost, that's simply reckless. If you bet big all the time, you will most likely find yourself all out of chips long before the game should be over. If you play it safe all the time, and only bet when the cards are heavily in your favor, you're less likely to bust out early, but you're equally unlikely to win any of those big pots. In the end, I think that the sentiment is generally true for those of us not born into a war zone or abject poverty. Leap, and the net will appear. But there's still something to be said for paying attention and trying to time that leap to improve your odds of a successful outcome. So don't be reckless. Don't keep betting big and betting too often, but don't play too conservative either. Sometimes you gotta bluff and play the hand that you don't actually have. It keeps the game interesting. It improves your odds of finishing in the money. And even if you don't, you're still not as likely to bust out early either. Let me leave you with another quote, this one by Helen Keller. Avoiding danger is no safer in the long run than outright exposure. The fearful are caught as often as the bold. So yeah, maybe don't overdo it. But every once in a while, you gotta leap. The net will appear.